Good morning, class 10. Open your political science text to chapter 1. Belgium and Sri Lanka is the power sharing process that is explained, and how each country had a different way of power sharing, and both were democracies. Belgium is a small country in Europe, having borders with France, Netherlands, Germany, and Luxembourg. Its population is a little more than a crore. The ethnic composition in Belgium is very complex. 59% of the total population speaks Dutch, 40% speaks French, and 1% speaks German. However, in Brussels, that is the capital of Belgium, 80% people speak French, while 20% speak Dutch. The French-speaking community was in minority, but were rich and powerful. This was resented by the Dutch, who, although got the benefit of economic development and education much later. This led to tensions between the two communities in the 1950s and 1960s. In Brussels, the problem was special. The Dutch-speaking people made up the majority in the country, but a minority in the capital, Brussels. We move on to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is an island nation. It has about 2 crore people. Sri Lanka has a diverse population. The major social groups are the Sinhala-speaking people that made up 74%. The Tamil-speaking were 18%. Tamils were divided into 2 subgroups: Tamil natives of the country or Sri Lankan Tamils made up 13%. The rest were Indian Tamils whose forefathers came from India. The Sri Lankan Tamils lived mostly in the north and the east of the country. Most of the Sinhala-speaking people were Buddhists, while most of the Tamils were Hindus and Muslims. There are about 7% Christians who are both from the Tamil community as well as the Sinhala community. Now imagine what could happen in Belgium if the Dutch community could take advantage of its numeric majority and force its will on the French and German-speaking people. Conflicts would lead to a very nasty situation in the country. In Sri Lanka, the Sinhala community enjoyed even more and a bigger majority and could impose its will on the entire nation. The government that supports the majority and neglects the minority is termed as a majoritarian government. This was the case in Sri Lanka. After independence, the Sinhala community secured dominance over the government due to their majority. As a result, the elected government adopted a series of majoritarian measures. How did they do this? In 1956, an act was passed which recognized Sinhala as the only official language, disregarding Tamil. The government followed preferential policies which favored Sinhala applicants for university jobs and government positions. The new constitution stated that the state shall protect and foster Buddhism, meaning Buddhism became the state religion. In other words, Sri Lanka now was declared to be a Buddhist country. Do you think that the Sri Lankan Tamils were going to accept these government measures, which came one after the other, lightly? Their sentiments were hurt. They felt left out. They felt that the political parties led by Sinhala leaders were not sensitive to their language and culture. They felt that the constitution and government policies denied them equal political rights. As a result, relations between the Sinhalas and Tamil communities were strained over the years. The Sri Lankan Tamils launched parties and struggles, putting their demands forward. But their demands were repeatedly denied. The distrust soon turned into a civil war, which lasted over 3 decades, where thousands on both sides were killed. This civil war caused a terrible setback to the social, cultural, and economic life of Sri Lanka. We move on to accommodation in Belgium. Earlier, we had seen the consequences when a government adopts majoritarian principles and neglects minorities. Now we will see how the Belgian leaders dealt with a similar problem. What was their approach? Firstly, the Belgian leaders recognized the existence of regional differences and cultural diversities. Secondly, they amended their constitution 4 times so as to work out an arrangement that would enable everyone to live together within the same country. The arrangements they made were very innovative. How? The constitution prescribes that the number of ministers from both communities shall be equal in the central government. Why did they do this? So that no single community can take decisions unilaterally. The Dutch-speaking community accepted the proposal. Second, many powers of the central government have been given to the state governments of the 2 regions of the country. The state governments are not subordinate to the central government. This is power sharing. Third, it further states that Brussels has a separate government in which both communities have equal representation. This was readily accepted by the French-speaking people. It became a mutual give and take mechanism. There was the third kind of government called community government, which is elected by people belonging to one language community, Dutch, French, and German speaking, no matter where they lived. This model is very complicated, but the arrangements have worked well. They helped to avoid civic strife and a possible division of the country on linguistic lines. What do we learn from these 2 stories? Both are democracies, but each dealt with its power sharing differently. In Belgium, the leaders realized that the unity of the country is possible by respecting the feelings and interests of different communities and regions. On the other hand, in Sri Lanka, if a majority community wants to force its dominance and refuses to share power, it can undermine the unity of the country. So a question can be raised. Why is power sharing desirable? Firstly, power sharing helps to reduce the possibility of conflicts between social groups. As social conflict leads to violence and political instability, and power sharing is a good way to ensure the stability of the political order. Imposing the will of the majority in the long run undermines the unity of the nation. Secondly, power sharing is the very spirit of democracy. A legitimate government is one where citizens, through participation, acquire a share in the system. Prudential reasons stress that power sharing will bring better outcomes, and moral reasons emphasize the very act of power sharing as valuable. Here, prudential means involving or showing care. We move on to page 8. The topic is forms of power sharing. What was the earlier belief on the idea of power sharing? It was believed that all power must be in the hands of one person or group of persons located at one place. If the power to decide is dispersed, it would not be possible to take quick decisions and to enforce them. Gradually, with the emergence of democracy, these notions have changed. One basic principle of democracy is that the people are the source of all power. People rule themselves through institutions of self-government. Everyone has a voice to shape public policies. These powers should be distributed among as many people as possible. In modern democracies, power sharing arrangements can take many forms. First, power is shared among different organs of government like the legislature, the executive, and judiciary. This is called horizontal distribution of power, as it allows different organs of government placed at the same level to exercise different powers. This separation ensures that none of the organs can exercise unlimited powers. Each organ checks the other, which results in a balance of power. Let us understand this through two examples. The first example: even though ministers and government officials exercise power, they are responsible to the parliament or state assemblies. Second example: although judges are appointed by the executive, they can check the functioning of executive or laws made by legislature. This arrangement is also called checks and balances. Second, power can be shared among different levels of government: the central government, the state government, and the local self-government or panchayats and municipalities. In India, the Constitution lays down the powers of different levels of government. It is called the federal division of power. This form is also called vertical division of power. Power is distributed between the central, the state, and lower levels of government like municipalities and panchayats. Third, power can be shared among different social groups like religious and linguistic groups. This ensures that socially weaker sections and women are represented in legislatures and administration. This is to give space in the government to diverse social groups. Otherwise, they would feel alienated from the government. Fourth, power sharing can be done among political parties, pressure groups, and movements. Citizens have the freedom to choose among various candidates for power. Competition ensures that power does not remain in one hand. Power is shared among different political parties having different ideologies and social groups. There are interest groups like traders, businessmen, industrialists, farmers, and industrial workers. They also will have a share in governmental power through participation or having influence on the decision-making process. Students of class 10, I'm going to give you a task. There are two words used in the political science book, chapter 1, alliance and coalition. You have to give me the differences between the two, not the meaning. I do not want the meaning of these two words. I want to know when you will use the word alliance and when you will use coalition. Do this on your own. Read, find out, think, and then write.